Many people assume the smartest move is to hand everything over to a financial advisor. But when you look at the evidence, especially things like the SPIVA scorecard, low-cost index investing is often the better starting point. Most actively managed funds underperform the market over time. So the real question is not whether an advisor is always good or bad. The real question is, when does it actually make sense to pay for advice, and what kinds of advice are we looking for? My view is that most people should DIY invest early on. Keep it simple, use low-cost index funds, focus on consistent savings and accounts that are tax advantaged like a TFSA and an RRSP. Then as life gets more complex, use a financial advisor more strategically, not just simply paying somebody and handing over all the keys to all of your investments. Especially on advice-only financial planners, I really am for using a financial-only approach rather than a percentage of assets every year. Only because you're simply paying for the advice, they're giving you their feedback, and then you can control and manage all of your investments as you see fit. So research from firms like Vanguard show that advisors don't add value by beating the market. They actually add value through planning, behavior, and tax strategies. So the real goal is, how do we make sure that we're actually getting those benefits? And so in this strategy of breaking everything down into 3 different stages, so we've got stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, I'm going to break this down a little bit more clearly for you. So let's get right into stage 1. So stage 1, I would identify as straight up DIY accumulation. So stage 1, DIY accumulation. In the beginning, investing is usually simple. You are mostly doing things like opening the right accounts, contributing regularly, choosing a simple index portfolio, and staying consistent. This is where DIY makes the most sense for many people. And the biggest advantage here is avoiding unnecessary fees while your money compounds over decades. So the investing is simple, but the real challenge is that behavior is not. Most people find that they feel like they can do it, but when it really comes down to the behavioral component, it actually reduces their returns when they're DIYing it. And the biggest risk is usually not complexity, it is panics, it is inconsistencies, it's chasing returns and procrastination. And so that's really what a lot of the research has shown. And studies from Vanguard show that investors often underperform their own investments by about 1 to 1.5% per year because of behavior. And so a lot of people actually underrate their behavior and think that they're actually a lot better at investing than they actually are. And so a lot of times that gives you this false confidence where, we are able to make those decisions and able to do that. But it's interesting because, when you look at the statistics, and I'll pull it up on my screen here, you can see here, even from Vanguard, I'll leave all these links, by the way, down below. But you can see here that Vanguard did some research, and they found that, the Vanguard Advisors Alpha is referring to 3 different areas that financial advisors have shown to be beneficial for people that are investing. So if you were to look at behavioral coaching, 150 basis points, which is basically that 1.5%, is significant out of this 3%, right? We've got portfolio construction, we've got wealth management. You can see that there's advantages that it can actually add in return value on your investments. And so there's lots of research out there that shows that there is a benefit to having a financial advisor, but what are those benefits? And so that's really stage 1. It's really interesting because, a lot of people, when they think of a financial advisor, they're thinking, not necessarily about the behavior, but they're thinking, well, what are you investing my money into? And, what's the returns going to look like compared to something I could do on my own? And so the financial advisor's advantage really is actually talking to you and helping you make those right decisions and have that healthy behavior. And so those are a lot of the challenges, I feel like, when it comes to investing. So in stage one, if I'm referring to DIY investing and saying that's the best approach, what kind of person would this be good for? Well, it'd be good for people that are, they have a steady job income, they have simple household finances, they have a long-term horizon, willingness to learn the basics, and ability to stay consistent in market downturns. It can be really a big advantage if you look at what it is that financial advisors are adding value to and realizing what kinds of things that have to be worked on in order to avoid those pitfalls. One of the biggest reasons, I lean towards a DIY approach early on is the long-term impact of fees. So having these disciplines of knowing what they're adding value to, knowing what you can control, there is a big advantage there. Even a 2% fee may not sound huge in 1 year, but over decades, it can be significant. Let's just pull up something here on my screen, actually. I'm going to go through a compound interest calculator and just give you a very clear example. So let's say we take, I've got it all plugged in here, $1,000. We look at an interest rate of about 8%, and we look at this over 30 years. If we calculate this, we can see that we have a total return of close to just shy of $11,000. So now let's just go back up to here and let's change that percentage. So let's just say we have, we're instead of paying that fee to the financial advisor over that course of 30 years off of our investments, let's say that we are doing that. We got to reverse that here. You can see 6,000. That is almost double the amount of money that you would make in the end. 6,000 versus 11,000. So when they say, oh, it's only a measly 2%, that's a significant portion of a portfolio that, is looking at an annual growth rate of about 8%. And so, research consistently shows that cost is one of the strongest predictors of long-term returns. And so, looking at financial advisors, looking at that they actually do add value, that they are giving things, and looking at what kinds of things you can control for, you can really identify the things that matter most. So if one person, is able to have a really healthy behavioral approach, is able to be very consistent in their approach, they have, a simple accumulation strategy, they're simply throwing things into some regular ETFs that they know is a research-backed approach to having a portfolio constructed. They're putting it into the right accounts. There's a lot of things that they can do where they can learn just the key basic elements. And again, we do have a community space and courses through Good Fruit Investors that we basically talk about all these things. And I feel like in regards to this stage one, you can really accomplish a lot of those things and actually give yourself those healthy forms of returns and allow yourself to accumulate and have that growth when it really matters in that compounding phase. And so that's a really big, important part is just really putting in the work and actually being able to set up the things. And again, because things are simple, there's a lot that you can actually learn and know and have the basics so that you can understand how to do those investments properly. So getting into stage two, this part I would say is the part that I would say, focuses around that complexity. So, if complexity is increasing, I would say this is a really good point to take like a hybrid approach where you're saying, okay, I'm not just going to do this completely independent, but I want to, I don't want to rely fully on a financial advisor. So in stage two, I kind of look at it like, this is situations where, maybe you've got 10 years until you're coming up to retirement, or, your income rises significantly, or you're unsure which types of accounts to prioritize. And you've got a lot of different options to have to consider. Like you've got TFSAs, RRSPs, mortgage down payments, non-registered. And you really just want to have somebody give you a little bit more direction on it. Because you're slowly accumulating, but now you're at a point where there's larger chunks that you have coming in, and you really want to make sure you know where to put that. Again, you can learn a lot of this on your own, depending on, how complex things are. But, things even like getting married, when you inherit money, right? Starting a business, being incorporated, pensions, that maybe you could potentially, might be a little bit more complex if you've got a few different things from a few different employers. So there's a lot of different things to consider as to when it might be a good time to, to basically trigger, talking to a financial advisor. And so really it boils down to, can I learn this information on my own? Is there a point where I'm saying to myself, okay, this complexity of my situation is getting a little bit out of hand. I really just want to have someone look at things and just double check stuff. So this is where I think a lot of people can get the best of both worlds. What I do think is important is knowing how retirement planning works for yourself. So using, there's a lot of various softwares out there. I personally use a software so that I'm able to basically track what my plan is and knowing how I could potentially optimize that retirement strategy. So I've got my own retirement plan, and there's different aspects of like using AI and other things within these planning softwares that a lot of financial advisors do themselves, where it provides these various suggestions on how to enhance that. And so that's something that is beneficial. And then, the key thing here is having an advice-only financial advisor review it and critique it. That way, you're the one that's in the driver's seat. And what you're doing is you're getting feedback around the things that you currently are, invested in. And so that way, your fees are a lot lower instead of just handing over the keys, giving them all of your investments and letting them manage everything, and then charging you a percentage on your portfolio or charging you really high fees. So there's a couple cool things that I like about this is, one, it helps you learn. So sure, it takes more time, but it also gets you to be more competent. And as you come closer and closer to retirement, I feel like it's beneficial to be able to have software and different things that can help you to know how to do this. It helps you test your own understanding. It gives you more confidence in the planning process. Having somebody critique what you already have after you've kind of done all the digging and the research. Imagine that they just look at it and say, you've really done a lot of details here, and there's not really a whole lot I could possibly change to add any value to your already existing plan. That would be like a pat on the back. Just knowing that, somebody's reviewing it, somebody that spends their life doing it, they're able to do that. It's like, I could be brushing my teeth. I could know that I don't have any sensitivities going on with my teeth. But when I go and I talk to the dentist and they go and they look and they find a cavity, they're going to say, hey, man, you got a cavity. This is probably going to be a big issue. Or they might say your teeth are totally fine. So I don't know that. And it's the same thing when we're DIYing things is, there might be some information out there that financial advisors have. And again, making sure you get the right financial advisor, someone who's very competent and somebody who can analyze your plan and be able to say, you know what, you actually have a big error here in the way that this approach is going to play out in the course of time. And they can pull up all of that information because you have used it yourself. They can pull up all of your information and put your information through a plan and show you where those discrepancies are, and then you can adjust accordingly. And so, knowing that, things like Vanguard, where they're saying that, they can add that 3% of value per year. And a lot of that comes from the planning and the behavior and not the investment selection. One, if we deal with our behavior in stage one and we really, make sure that we don't fall into any of those traps, we're not, acting impulsive. We're not, procrastinating. We're just staying consistent and persistent in the investment approach that we know has been proven through research. By doing those simple actions, right, we're basically stopping the behavior from being a problem. And then when it comes to the planning, when we start entertaining that aspect of understanding the planning to a certain degree, not feeling like we have to accomplish and go to school and have, that huge, educational component to be able to be that financial planner. And then we use tools that we can craft our own financial plans within, and they make it really simple for people that are DIYers. And then we cross-reference that, right? We're basically lowering down that cost of the plan. And so when is it good to use this? I would say when you're, again, like all of the things we talked about, when you're coming close to retirement, maybe about 10 years out from retirement, or your complexities change. There's lots of advantages to doing that. Now, getting into stage 3, retirement and decumulation, this is actually a really important part. And there's actually some really cool research in here as well too. One from Morningstar that I really want to mention, just in regards to the advantage of having a healthy withdrawal strategy, because you can add about, 30% to your retirement plan overall. So that equates to, I think it was like almost 2% or 1.5% per year of returns, just by simply picking the right approach. Again, I will put all of these links within the video, so you can see here by about 29%, 1.82%, sorry, higher returns. So having a healthy plan at this point is actually really important. And so really saying to yourself, I want to cross-check what I am doing, I'd say it's more detrimental at this point, because you're having a higher impact from that plan. In the beginning, the plan maybe isn't as relevant, or maybe you can pivot. And even as complexities increase, like in stage 2, it may not matter as much as when you're at stage 3. Now, this doesn't mean you need to have a financial advisor handhold. Again, if you were following something like this kind of a plan, you're slowly progressing into having conversations with financial planners, not having them take over your investment portfolio. This is another cool thing I just wanted to show you. And this, again, will be linked down below, but this is within the paper from Morningstar. I just like it because it's just showing you various types of firms that have been studying what kinds of value is added from different financial planning activities. And so you can see a number of different people have researched this. So there's lots of information out there around these types of things, and just valuing and validating what a financial advisor is good for. A lot of times people get so confused about a financial advisor. Again, going back to that original point, I want a financial advisor that's going to get me the best returns. It's like, guys, that's not what the financial advisor is there to do. Like, if you understand the research, you understand how actively managed funds aren't going to outperform. It really boils down to a lot of other factors: behavior, right? Doing tax advantaging, doing healthy withdrawal strategies, all of that. And so that's the kind of stuff that we really just wanted to, I wanted to unpack with you here. And so when you look at stage 3, what are we really looking at here, right? Like, why is it so complex? Well, it's because, how much should I should I be withdrawing? And from which accounts? Should I be pulling it from a TFSA, an RRSP? Should I convert my RSP to a RIF? What about taxable account sequencing? What about CPP timing, OAS timing? What about tax efficiencies? What about sequence of returns risk? What about estate and survival planning, or adjusting when life circumstances change? There's so many aspects of the plan that need to be at play, and that's where looking at one person's plan and their withdrawal rate really is going to be different than the other, because, even that research from Morningstar, what it's comparing to is basically looking at a basic withdrawal rate and just looking at just pulling, very vanilla, very straightforward in how you're pulling those investments. And so, when you look at being able to have a plan that's very adaptable and knows how to trigger different elements at different times, and has, a software that's able to analyze the whole process from, where you are and where you want to be, like how much, life expectancy are you going to have and how much are you planning into your plan, right? There's a lot of factors there and a lot of different dynamics. So those are the things that, having a financial plan is really beneficial for. And really what I would say is what I personally look for, with having a financial advisor that I specifically would want to have a conversation with. I want a financial advisor to outsmart me and outwit me in things. That to me says that you've now given me value, that you've given me the ability to, to be able to let me understand something that now has put dollars back into my pocket. And so then paying that fee, right? So paying that $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 fee to be able to have that information, knowing that it's going to maximize my returns by significantly greater than that, $1,000 to $3,000, that's the advantage. And so that's really a huge point here. So I would say that in a lot of ways, when I'm in the stage 3, as long as nothing is changing with my approach and, I've got a very healthy understanding of it, and I've cross-checked that with a financial advisor, and nothing's really changing a whole lot, I probably don't need to go and talk to a financial advisor very often, maybe every few years. But if my plan starts to change and there's a lot of factors that I have to readjust, and I've done those readjustments and I want to have a financial advisor look at them, that's when I'd probably set up another appointment to go and have a conversation with a financial advisor. So there's a lot of important questions to ask. Is the time I need to spend learning and acting on this worth more or less than the cost of getting help? So doesn't really matter which stage you're in. You just have to ask yourself that question. And basically what you're looking at is you're looking at opportunity costs. It's an economic thing. You're looking at opportunity costs, right? Your time has value, whether that is your hourly income or the value of your time with family, business, or other priorities that it would take away from. So the big question really boils down to, how many hours is it that you take to learn the basics, build a plan, maintain it, review changes over time? Then compare that to your hourly rate. And that's why I personally take more of a blended approach, because there is a point where a DIY investor, the amount of time and that opportunity cost gets to be significantly higher. And I would say that that's where those cross checks really are beneficial. I really believe that there's a lot of information that we can learn and that we can understand. And there's lots of software out there that can really learn and help us understand what we need in order to have an effective plan. And, you could argue that there's enough out there to be able to completely DIY and never talk to a financial advisor. So there is a potential for that. Again, I just think that, if you're somebody that's wanting to look at what's the easiest thing, try to figure out where you fit in regards to, how you would want to have a financial advisor working with you. So for some people, DIY clearly just saves money. For others, paying for a one-time or occasional advice may actually be better value. And again, the studies show, right, that from things like Vanguard, around a 3% return, right, could be given to somebody as a result of having a really healthy financial planner working alongside them, being able to deal with their behavior, being able to deal with the planning component of it, the tax efficiencies, all of that. So to close this out, I would say, I do not think that most people need to pay ongoing asset-based fees for decades, but I do think many people benefit from professional advice at key moments. And the goal is to pay for expertise when it adds real value and you can quantify that has actually put a value in your pocket. not to pay unnecessary fees forever. And the research is actually very consistent. Markets are hard to beat. Behavior is the biggest risk, and planning is where advisors add the most value. I hope this was beneficial for you and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.